There we go. I'm going to suggest that you do is choose the speaker view, and I will ask all the people on the panel today, Zoe, Kristian, Vasiliki and Lene, to use the raise hand function on the reactions, and then you will appear in a panel on a strip on the top or down the side. There. And I'll ask everybody who is not on the panel to mute themselves. I think most people are mute. You are. Great, thank you. So for this next hour and a quarter, we're going to be talking about things that institutions that grew out of structures within the Group Analytic Society, specifically EGATIN, which the acronym stands for the European Group Analytic Training Institute Network. And we have here two delegates who have both been chairpersons of EGATIN, who have long been interested in the history of the development of EGATIN, and two trainees near the end or at the end of their trainings in their own institutes, just to give us a bit of a spread of thoughts about what GASi has moved on to, what's given birth to. And I'm going to ask Zoe to start. She is a clinical psychologist by background, as well as a group analyst and a family and couples therapist. She was a founding member of the Open Psychotherapy Centre and the IGA Athens, and continues to work in private practice there. And she's been a member of GASi since the late 80s, and as I said, a past chair of EGATIN. She's also currently the co-chair of the GASi Fund. So, Zoe.
Okay, thank you, Linde. Good evening, everyone. I think it's the first time I'm doing a presentation actually on Zoom, and I wonder how it will be, but we will soon find out. Let me thank Werner and Carla for inviting me to be in this anniversary workshop. And I'd like to say that it is strange to think that GASi is 70 years old. I've been a member of it for about half that time, and well, when it was founded, I wasn't born. So I'm pleased to be on this panel, though we're not sitting close together live, but it's nice to be with the new generation of group analysts like Lene and Vasiliki, and nice to be co-presenting with Kristian again, with whom we've worked for long years together through good and difficult times, but we're both very much EGATIN people, and certainly long-standing ones. Kristian, I think you have been a delegate to EGATIN for a record long time. I've been a committee member for a very long time, 2 decades, I believe. The first was during the founding years when I had just qualified as the second delegate from IGA Athens. And the second phase was till about 8 years ago, when I was elected in the committee, being the delegate of IGA Athens, and then went on to become chairperson. So as today we're celebrating an anniversary, my mind goes back to all those years, to the long journey to the present, and how we have come to be what we are now. I'm also thinking how we as individuals contribute to organizations and how in turn they affect and they shape us. I must say I feel grateful and privileged to have been a member of both GASi and EGATIN, and to have contributed to an extent to their evolution. With the prospect of this panel in mind, I have looked into a lot of material from the past, and I just have been amazed at how much history there has been, which is related both to the beginnings of EGATIN and before its beginnings, and to the internationalization of GASi, which finally became in 2010. And I should say that both of these actually seem to date back to Fuchs himself, who wrote on several occasions that the eventual aim was to have an international association of group analysts. Now, the society is the very first organization and is for me and for most of us the initial matrix where everything began. I think it is the going for lunch to grandmas that was mentioned yesterday. When I started training as a group analyst, that was in Athens in the early 80s, I thought that IJ London came first, or at the same time. Perhaps others did too, or some may still think so. I was surprised to find out that the IJ London was founded some 15 years after the Group Analytic Society, mostly by members of the society. And I think that I saw someplace that Fuchs wasn't actually a member of it, if I understood it right. When I was a trainee, membership to the Group Analytic Society was very difficult to achieve, especially being a full member, which carried with it a sort of recognition of some kind. It later became, of course, that GAS student members who were graduates of EGATIN institutes at the qualifying level could become automatically full members. I may come back to that later. But I will go back to the beginnings of EGATIN, of which I have personal experience. The first thing I'd like to note, and that I have thought of, is how much things have changed. So, for example, I'm here, invited to be in this panel as a member of GASi on the one hand, but also as an EGATIN person, mainly. And that doesn't seem surprising. However, in the beginnings of EGATIN, these two organizations were not quite on talking terms. So we certainly have come a long way. Then there was a lot of mistrust and tension, to say the least. And something that sums it up very well is a paper by the late and very dear Brian Boswood, a very outspoken paper, I think, for the time. It was presented in the Oxford Symposium, 1990, and the theme there aptly was mistrust in the matrix. So he was saying that when the idea of EGATIN was conceived, the interest and excitement it aroused within the society was matched by angry consternation. The interest and excitement was because a truly European Federation of Training Institutes might escape the British Empire model, which had so bedeviled the Society's international work. The consternation was that the move was a splitting maneuver, or that it represented a power ploy designed to move the focus of group analysis from London to Athens. He said that what heard in those days was, what is this EGATIN? And it will be a flash in the pan. Here today, gone tomorrow. What are they up to now? What is Tsegos up to now? And who do they think will pay for it? Actually, there was an offer from society to pay for it when Dennis Brown, who was then president of GAS London, proposed that the society could support the new organization financially, because how else would it function? Yanis Tsegos, who, as you probably know, initiated and put forth the idea and was EGATIN's first president, said that no, if the network is going to grow, it would have to support itself. And if it proves unable to do so, then it might as well not function at all. So this was a declaration that EGATIN wanted to be independent and would not succumb to the pressures of being incorporated. I found this interesting quote in one Campus's writings on the history of the group analytic movement, which I was fascinated. There was a whole lot of material there. He said, as group analysts, we know that no change goes without resistances, and neither without a strong tendency to take a U-turn back to the place of departure. The best method a system has to avoid change, as Bion taught us, is to neutralize innovations. We were talking about innovations yesterday too, by incorporating those who sponsor innovative ideas and are acting as spokesmen in the establishment. That way, the people are absorbed, the movement is stopped, and the idea is forgotten. So that was fortunately not done. So in thinking back, I also tried to isolate a few of the more decisive moments in this history from the EGATIN side now, which I think I will mention a few. I think first was the formation of the first group of colleagues. So when the idea of a training institutions network did not go forward in the European Working Group, Yanis Segos decided to carry it forward, and they got together with a number of colleagues. It was Werner, who mentioned it yesterday, and John Schlapoberski and Rudy Olivieri, a couple more who came for a little bit. Then later, we had Vibeke Nathan from Copenhagen and Jose Guimon from Spain, and then several others. But I think the first point was the formation of this group, which is very tightly knit, was very tightly knit. Then I would say that it was important in the initial meetings when all this was discussed publicly, that Malcolm Pines, I think it was in one of the two Zagreb meetings, 84 or 86, 1984, 1986, and he characterized the new effort as a very group analytic development. So I think that was a very, important moment that helped things go forward. Another one, I think, was when quite early on, after this first initial group was formed, and we had from London John Schlapoberski, who was there as a volunteer, IJ London decided to appoint Brian Boswood, and Brian Boswood was the chairman of the council, so that carried an extra weight with it. So I think that was a very, very important point in the relations between IJ London and EGATIN, and in the acceptance that was hopefully there from the Mother London Institute. I think two other factors are important in the development of EGATIN. I think that it was, as I said above, that it stayed independent financially, that it kept boundaries, and that it functioned on a group analytic basis. To make a connection to more recent events, after EGATIN was officially founded and started developing, during, I think, about the first 15 years of its functioning, although its presence was consolidating, there wasn't much actual cooperation between EGATIN and GASi. It was GASi then. It was a sort of cautious coexistence. I think EGATIN had a closer wish for a collaboration, but it didn't happen in practice. So a bit later, it was when I had returned to EGATIN and was chair-elect by that time. Kristian, who was the chairman of EGATIN, managed to arrange a meeting, an audience, you could call it, of EGATIN with the management committee of gas for the first time. Maybe this was facilitated by the fact, I think you mentioned Kristian being in another group with Gerda for a long time, and perhaps because you are both Danish. So I remember that we traveled to London specifically for this purpose, and that I was disappointed because they told us we could only stay for 15 minutes because they were very busy. Still, it had happened. Subsequent to that, when my own term as chairwoman began, somehow we started cooperating with Gerda more. And that was very pleasant. I think it was on a more regular basis, and I think it was partly that the time had come, and partly that, you know, we felt it was nice to work together. And around that time, there were a couple more occasions which made for a closer cooperation. And one of those was that when the GAS was to become, to change the name to become international in practice, and the change of constitution was to take place, there was a working group for the revision, and I was asked to participate in it. This was rather unexpected for me, but I think it had to do with, on the one hand, being a Greek, because always there was many Greek colleagues in the society, but also due to the fact that I was an EGATIN person. So that was also a good memory. I think, Werner, you were there too, and Anne and Don and some other colleagues.
Zoe, perhaps
Yes?
just a couple of minutes more.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to add that some of the important things that I think that EGATIN has brought into the group analytic scenes. I think it was the several surveys that were carried out. The first was before it was actually founded, you know, that tabulated all the institutes, and based on that, we made the initial criteria for EGATIN. And then I believe Kristian will tell you more about them later. That it functioned in a group analytic way, that there was an upholding of standards for group analytic work, and that it has worked in an international spirit, and it has expanded very much from when it started, from 14 institutes to 44, and that it had contact with other international organizations. So looking back, I think it was a very necessary development, and I feel that it has complemented GASi very well. As Yanis insisted from the start, the main significance of the move of focus away from London to all of Europe, not just Athens, of course, is that it made the group analytic movement truly group-centered, while the London periphery model was essentially therapist-centered. And the fact that this succeeded, I think, pays tribute to the effectiveness of the group analytic model and to the stable basis provided by the Group Analytic Society and IGA London. Thank you.
Zoe, thank you so much. Okay. Now I'm going to ask Kristian to follow on from that. As you heard, these are colleagues who've worked together for a long time. Kristian himself has worked for more than 30 years as a psychiatrist and consultant psychotherapist at Aarhus University Hospital in Denmark, and was an associate clinical professor at the university there. He's been involved in research in psychotherapy for many years. His own diploma in group analysis is from IGA in London, but on a course that was run in Oslo. He's the co-founder and first chairman of the Institute of Group Analysis in Aarhus, and continues as a teacher in its training program. And he is still the Aarhus delegate to the EGATIN, and was on the committee for 10 years, 5 years of which as president. He's also a former member of the GASi Management Committee, having stepped down at the last symposium, and a member of the editorial committee for the journal. Kristian, would you like to carry on from where Zoe took us?
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation. What can I say? What can I contribute with to the history of EGATIN? I have thought about that. There are so many stories to tell, and this will of course be my personal view and my personal understanding. I think it's important to remind that EGATIN is a collection of institutes. It's not and for individual members, the institutes are members of this network. And the task or the issue for EGATIN is training issues. And the question has been, how could we organize education in group analysis, which could make the most of it in a group therapeutic practice? To be or not to be a good enough group analyst to do group analytic psychotherapy, that has always been the question of EGATIN. Many countries in Europe had for a shorter or longer time group analysts from the institutes in London to educate teachers to be able to found and model their own institute. These processes ran differently in different countries. And in those years, there was a discussion about when training was enough. Would training never end and independence and development begin? Allow me to take the beginning of my own institute as an example of what I will call the spirit of EGATIN. Believe in it, start walking, and be confident that it can develop to be good enough. In Aarhus, we wanted to establish a second Danish institute after years with teachers from Copenhagen who delivered training in blocks, but with continuous training, continuous therapy. We asked Werner Knaus, who at that time was the president of EGATIN, to supervise our new program. He came to Aarhus 6 times a year for a 3-year period, introduced us to EGATIN, and invited us to the symposium in Heidelberg in 1993. The institute in Norway, at that time still with teachers from London, opened their doors so we as future teachers could continue our own training in Oslo. Thanks to you, Werner and Sigmund. How to organize training has always been a matter of personal, cultural, and often also idiosyncratic decisions. Sylvia Hutchington, who later with Jane Campbell directed the Turvey Institute, brought valuable experience and organizational practice to EGATIN. And now, Stefan, I hope you're out there. Can you show us the first? Well, here's the committee meeting in Aarhus in 2002, and you can probably recognize some of the members. Sylvia was chair at that time, as far as I remember, or was it Ivan, who probably is behind the camera here? Thank you. EGATIN introduced 3 levels of institutional membership: introductory, intermediate, and qualifying, and published the essential training standards as the benchmark for new institutes to meet. The membership level should be determined by some formalized information, and the teachers in the training should be trained group analysts. In this way, EGATIN, by its membership, gave credibility to new institutions, but at the same time kept avoiding status as a certifying organization. The wish for a certificate as a group analyst has, however, been a returning wish for some colleagues in the member institutions. When I was member of the national representation in the group section in ESPP, we worked for a long time to complete a European certificate for group psychotherapists, and we more or less ended up by using the criteria from EGATIN as to what was needed to be certified, and added to that 2 years of practice after ending training. Originally, EGATIN was described as a train which traveled the Europe in network and stopped at stations where mutual exchange and inspiration could happen. Over the years, for me, EGATIN developed to be an extended family where I met new and old colleagues and friends. It has been exciting to experience the cultural differences and also the great hospitality from the shifting hosts at the study days. I will mention that during my time as chair, both IGA Athens and IGA Lisbon were remembered into EGATIN as the group analytic milieu in Europe. The study day has always tried to comprehend what was the issues of the time. Also in EGATIN, there has been a generational shift among teachers and a delegate. Can I have the next slide? The study days in Oslo in 2008 had the theme transmitting knowledge and engendering enthusiasm, EGATIN in the past, present, and future. As you can see, there are a long-lasting and fantastic treasure for Kristian, Brian, and Rudy as former presidents, and this lady in the middle, which I shamefully cannot remember the name of, is a student who was participating in the meeting. Thank you. But who are we and what kind of training are we actually providing in our institutes? Next slide, Stefan. In 2008, I took the initiative to make a survey which showed that training differed from country to country depending on culture and tradition. All qualifying institutes, of course, met the essential training standards, but some countries had a much longer analysis, and for some, an individual training in psychoanalysis should precede a group analytic supplementary. The response rate was a true gesture of trust. More than 94% returned the questionnaires. The report and presentation of the results was unfortunately never published, but the presentations of the survey in London in 2011 is available at the EGATIN website. Thank you. The question whether a training could be considered good enough if it was done in blocks will no longer be such an issue. More than half of the training programs deliver their training in blocks today, and half of the candidates get their personal therapy in homogeneous groups with only trainees, and this tendency is from patient groups to all trainee groups. In my view, there can be a gain to have all three modalities, that is therapy, theory, and supervision under the training umbrella. There can be a synergistic understanding from module to module. Next slide, please. All the 32 participants of the survey were listed after the city in which they were located. And you can see the institute in London was founded, I hope it's true, in 1972. And the one in Lisbon was already founded in 1964. Thank you. We know from the delegates and from our surveys that it is troublesome for the trainees after the formal training is over to reach the final post by writing a diploma paper. It inspires us to have a study day in Copenhagen 2006 with the theme, the process of putting group analytic work into writing. Please, Stefan. Not this one, another one. The next one, please. Based on the presentation there, Carterud and Island wrote an article published in the journal. On the photo, you can recognize Malcolm Pines, who for some years took pleasure joining the EGATIN study days, which often conjoined with his birthday.
Welcome.
Thank you. If the group treatment should be economically paid and supported by the state, the practice with the patients must be shown to help them. And in many countries, this means that the treatment must be evidence-based and documented by research. I see research in the clinical field not only ethical mandatory, but also useful for arguing the value of group psychotherapy. The EGATIN website has a research section, which should be a possibility for all colleagues, students, and others to be informed and inspired by old and new articles and presentations regarding advances in group analytic and group dynamic psychotherapy. It is my hope that the teachers in the institutes will find material to their training programs and practicing group analysts to expand their knowledge about the use of groups. Next slide, please. Let me summarize. EGATIN could be seen as providing a matrix for the active representatives of the institutes, and it is my impression that EGATIN contributes substantially to the European group analytic identity. Although EGATIN is not an accrediting organization, membership of EGATIN is recognized as a quality mark for training. EGATIN has in the past and can in the future offer knowledge and support regarding the organization of new training, for example, by bringing forward examples of similar organizational processes, learning and solutions, and practical codes from other institutes. Thank you. EGATIN facilitates exchange between local training and the broader group analytic milieu, a possibility made by moving the study days from country to country. The tradition has been to invite a diversity of engaged colleagues to have a closer encounter with local training cultures. One of the differences between GASi and EGATIN, I believe, is the awareness and vulnerability people feel in relation to the health marketplace. People are looking for ways of using their group analytic education and skills, while at the same time trying to make a living along with other parties. This means, of course, that applied forms of group analysis are in their interests and that they are looking for organizations to help them with this. GASi has a respected academic and intellectual tradition, which with sometimes an ambivalent attitude to the medical model. I think this has been experienced as resistance to pragmatic ways of using group analysis in the national health system. I believe EGATIN represents a democratic organization which offers equality in our meeting, regardless of age or level of training in the institutes. In GASi, by contrast, I feel tempted to say, I sometimes get the feeling that some animals are more equal than others. For me, it has always been a matter of great importance to facilitate listening and understanding of the presentations and the discussions in EGATIN. This means also to use any technological help possible and available to communicate the points. When it comes to organizational questions and decisions to be taken about conflicting issues, it is important that you can argue your case. It therefore matters whether English is your native tongue or not. In EGATIN, the official language has been said to be bad English, accommodating the fact that there is a language barrier. One of the tasks of EGATIN is to listen, not to dictate or regulate. Thanks for this opportunity to give my view from a long-lasting journey with the EGATIN train.
Thank you very much, Kristian. Could I just remind people who are not on the panel to mute themselves, because even rustling or coughing makes your face appear on the screen. So we are now going to invite the younger generation to make a contribution, and we will start with Vasiliki, who is in her 4th year of training in group analysis at the Athens Institute. She's a psychologist by background, having done her MSc in clinical psychology at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Vasiliki, over to you. Thank you.
Good evening to everyone. I will talk to you about my experience as a trainee and my experience in EGATIN study days in Rome last June. So, the first contact I had with the group analytic thinking was during the course of my master's studies in the Netherlands, while I was doing my internship with the group analyst Polly Papageorgiou in her private office. Polly is a graduate of the Athens Institute of Group Analysis and has worked at the Open Psychotherapy Center. As soon as I graduated from my master's degree, I made the decision to return back to Greece and seek a training program in psychotherapy. Polly's contribution was very useful at that time, as she suggested to me to pursue the training at the Athens Institute of Group Analysis. Until then, the only experience I had in a group context was my participation in a theater students group that we coordinated as members in order to put on performances. At the end of its rehearsal, we used to sit in a circle and discuss any issues that arose between us, a situation that resembles an informal psychotherapy group. So, the prospect of being trained in group analysis seemed very appealing to me and reminded me of the sense of belonging I used to experience as a member of the theater group. The first time I heard of GASi was during the second year of my studies, when some of my fellow trainees were going to attend a GASi symposium in Barcelona. Unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, my fellow trainees didn't travel to Spain, as the symposium took place online. The impression I firstly formed about GASi was that of a society where group analysts from all over the world come together in order to discuss common concerns and work together towards common aims. A few months later, while discussing with my fellow trainees about our upcoming participation in international symposia, which is mandatory in our training, I formed a clearer view about EGATIN. I came to understand that it is a network of the group analysis institutes with the aim of getting to know each other, upholding high standards in group analysis, promoting dialogue, and exchanging opinions at the scientific, research, and clinical level. I was looking forward to participating in the upcoming EGATIN study days. Indeed, I traveled together with a group of Greek trainees to Rome last June. The main impression from my experience at the EGATIN study days in Rome was that the same issues which concern group analysts and trainees in the country where I live, Greece, concern group analysts throughout Europe and around the world. In addition, I was impressed by the cultural diversity that emerged within the small groups, such as the differences in temperament among the participants. Nevertheless, although we were different in some ways, both the small and the large groups were able to include us all. What touched me the most was the discussion that arose about the war between Russia and Ukraine in the large group, the experiences that two colleagues from these countries shared with us, the emotions we experienced, the long silences that followed, and the group phenomena that emerged. Of course, what brought us even closer as a group were the informal and structured activities, such as the breaks, when we had the opportunity to enjoy our coffee and chat with each other about the training programs and the opportunities for clinical practice and the ability to work in our respective countries. I was fascinated by the Italian hospitality, as the organizing group treated us to delicious Italian meals, drinks, and even a karaoke party where we all danced and sang together until late. The time we all spent together and the discussions we had about our personal and professional background made me feel like a member of a strong network that shares community characteristics. This community feeling is not far from what I experience in the Athens Institute of Group Analysis. In particular, as trainees of the Institute, belong to a training community where we interact directly and in person with our fellow trainees and instructors. Sensitivity groups and sensitivity peer groups, which are exclusively coordinated by trainees, form the common ground to evaluate the relations between us and discuss about any other possible issues. Over time, I ended up realizing that these two groups create a safe space for me to express any concerns, dissatisfaction, or difficulties I have, but also share gratitude, joy, and a lot of fun. The Greek supervision model is another topic I had the opportunity to discuss during the informal activities in Rome. Some colleagues approached and asked me information about the Institute and the Greek model of supervision that was first implemented by Dr. Yannis Tsegos and has been presented in many occasions in symposia and other scientific events. According to the model, the supervision is carried out in groups. Each group is coordinated by a trainee, while an experienced observer is also present. During the presentation, the members of the supervision group complete a three-part supervision protocol, including feelings, fantasies, and topics that come from the presentation that took place. In the end, all these are gathered on a blackboard and the group proceeds to synthesis. I'm grateful for being a trainee of the Athens Institute of Group Analysis the last 3 years, as it has been an ongoing, fulfilling journey of learning. Finally, I feel very happy for having the opportunity to participate in this panel, and I'm looking forward to our next encounters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vasiliki, sharing some of your experience. And our final contribution will be from Lene Hjort, to hear more about another institute and its approach. Lene is a child and adolescent psychiatrist working in Aarhus University Hospital. She works in the inpatient department for patients with eating disorders, as well as in the outpatient group analytic treatment program. Lene finished her training in group analytic psychotherapy at the IGA in Aarhus in Denmark this summer. So Lene, over to you.
Thank you. I will try to share my screen. Yes, I hope this works okay.
We can see it.
Okay. I was recently a trainee in group analytic psychotherapy at the Institute of Group Analysis in Aarhus, Denmark. And I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist at the public psychiatric hospital at Aarhus University Hospital. And as you said, Linde, I work in the department for children and adolescent and adults with severe eating disorders, where most of the psychotherapy is organized as group psychotherapy. I also work at the outpatient group analytic treatment program. Group analysis offers me an integrating way of experiencing and thinking about the patient, the parents or relatives, my colleagues, myself, our organization and society. We are social beings, and group processes are omnipresent. Group analysis, group analytic psychotherapy, and group psychotherapy are essential, useful, and rewarding methods in my work with patients and colleagues in a psychiatric hospital. Patients and relatives come to the hospital reluctantly due to anxiety, pain, shame, ambivalence. Patients may suffer from complex condition, and assessment is important in order to introduce the patient to the right group or a different treatment modality. When group psychotherapy is suggested, most people are unfamiliar with the method, often surprised by the suggestion and hesitant and ambivalent about joining a group. Group analysis encourages us to cultivate a group culture of concern, empathy, trust, and pursue group cohesion. Further, group analysis teaches us to appreciate and translate the patient's communication and promote a group conversation and free-floating associations. Work in groups responds to the loneliness and isolation that is so prevalent in psychiatric patients. Often the group work must be adjusted to suit the group membership. We attempt to create and maintain a group culture supportive enough for group members to feel safe enough to stay in the group and share and work with thoughts and feelings. Over and over, group members may recognize themselves in others and experience that they are not alone. Group members may gradually learn more about themselves and others and gain new emotional experiences. And this is our idea about how to move forward. The tripartite activities of group analytic training, personal therapy in a group, studies of psychoanalytic and group analytic theory, and supervision of practice is rich, challenging, and rewarding. The studies of psychoanalytic and group analytic theory provide essential concepts and the structure needed. During supervision, theoretical concepts are connected to clinical images. During my first 2 years of training, I brought to supervision my conducting, together with a co-therapist, of a homogeneous outpatient group of adolescents recovering from eating disorders. After that, I worked in supervision with the assessment of group members, composing and conducting my mandatory patient group, which is a heterogeneous, slow open group analytic group of adults in the outpatient treatment program at our public psychiatric hospital. During personal therapy in a group, I experienced a group culture of concern and empathy. My process exposed themes I realized are recognizable to others. I experienced myself in the landscape of group members and my valency for certain roles in the group. And I experienced how the group affects me and how I may affect others in the group. The exploration and working through of conflict is life-changing and liberating. The large group provides a place for reflection on our experiences as trainees and group analysts in the National Mental Health Service and Society. So group analysis is of great value to me in my work as well as in my personal life, supporting my finding my voice and a position to speak from. I feel very fortunate that group analytic training is available to me. Structures and resources supportive of creative group processes are under pressure. The new hospital building is already too small. Lack of resources favor short-term treatment followed by transition to municipality services. A deteriorating working environment in national hospitals caused experienced clinicians to leave, and new young colleagues may have very little or no psychotherapeutic training at all. The IGA Aarhus celebrated its 25-year anniversary in September 2015, and on that occasion held a symposium entitled Group Joy with Danish and international speakers. All doctors and psychologists at Aarhus University Psychiatric Hospital was invited. The anniversary symposium gave me a taste of group analysis, its applications in clinical settings and organizations, and of the IGA Aarhus community. Through more than 30 years, the IGA Aarhus offers a viable training program in group psychotherapy, and for more than 20 years, a training program for organizational consultants based on group analysis. Since 2008, IGA Aarhus is a qualifying member of EGATIN, offering professionally relevant and certified training courses in group psychotherapy, group analytic psychotherapy, management and consultation based on group analysis. IGA Aarhus graduates hold clinical and management position at various levels in the National Health Service, municipality services, or private organization and businesses in Denmark, or work in private practice. And trainees are recruited from across West Denmark. The training program connects trainees to the International Society of Group Analysis through the certified training and by encouraging our participation in international meetings. Further, every year, an international expert in group analysis is invited to speak and supervise in the training program, as well as speak at a member meeting, providing important connections to and inspiration and wisdom from the International Group Analytic Society. So in conclusion, I wish to thank the organizers for the opportunity to present my ideas about becoming a group analyst and my ideas about my training in group analysis.
Many thanks, Lene. Could you just stop sharing your screen?
Yes, I will try quickly.
Thanks very much. Before I open the conversation up widely, I just wanted to thank all of our contributors, and I wondered if there are any questions that you had for each other. Perhaps then we could open it up to everyone. If you would take down your raised hands, then and I suggest people then move back to the gallery view